The night had started innocently enough with no real plan, just a way to ll time. I hadn't seen Haley much over the past few weeks, and there were things I wanted to discuss with her, but nothing felt urgent enough to start a serious conversation. So I decided to go out just to pass the time. I wandered into the club, the music pounding in the air, the low hum of chatter filling the space. It was crowded, but I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a distraction. When I first stepped in, the bright lights and swirling crowd were enough to pull me in. For a while, I just leaned against the bar, scanning the room, trying to blend in, letting the noise drown out the thoughts in my head. It had been a long week. Work was hectic, and I was growing frustrated with the silence that had settled between Haley and me. We'd been married for 5 years, and in many ways, I thought our relationship was unbreakable. But recently, it felt like we were strangers. I didn't want to admit it, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't trying to dig up any dirt. I was simply there to ll some time, to clear my head. But then, the sight of her stopped me in my tracks. I saw Haley before she saw me. She was sitting at a small table in the corner, and my heart did a strange, painful flip in my chest when I saw her. There was something about the way she was sitting, the way she was laughing that caught my attention. Her posture was relaxed, her eyes sparkling with something I hadn't seen in a while. She hadn't looked at me like that in months. What made it worse was that she wasn't laughing alone. She was sitting close to a man. Not just close, but too close. His hand rested on the edge of her drink, as though it was a completely normal thing. And she was laughing. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her in what felt like forever. The way she threw her head back, a full, genuine laugh that reached her eyes, making the room around her blur and fade. She was completely lost in the moment, unaware of the world around her. I froze. I didn't know what to do with myself in that moment. My stomach dropped, the air around me suddenly feeling thick and suffocating. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. I wanted to walk over, to interrupt, to ask what was going on, but I couldn't move. It was like my body refused to respond to the growing sense of panic inside me. I wasn't sure why, but seeing her like that, so carefree, so familiar with this stranger, sent a sharp pang through my chest. I couldn't breathe properly. I couldn't even think straight. All I could do was stand there, watching her as she shared this moment with someone else. I hated that feeling, the helplessness, the fear that I had somehow lost her. But, at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to turn away. I needed to know what was happening. Why was she laughing like that with him, but not with me? Haley noticed me almost immediately. Her smile faltered for a second, just a moment of surprise, before she recovered and gave me that familiar, warm look. I tried to smile back, but my lips felt stiff. She didn't stand up, didn't pull away from the man she was sitting with. Instead, she just waved at me, her hand lifting in a casual, almost dismissive way. "Hey, Mark, over here," she called, her voice chipper, though there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. I felt a sudden wave of nausea as I made my way toward the table. The closer I got, the more intense the feeling became. This wasn't just some innocent encounter. Couldn't be. But what was it? And why didn't she seem fazed by it at all? I reached the table and stopped a few feet away, my feet feeling heavier with every step. The man at her side, Ethan, as she would later introduce him, smiled at me, standing up briefly to offer a handshake. His smile seemed too wide, too forced, like he was aware of something he shouldn't have been. The energy in the air was thick, thick with something unspoken that made my chest tighten. "This is Ethan," Haley said with a nonchalant shrug. "An old friend from work. You know how it is, chance encounter." I barely heard her words. "Old friend?" I managed to ask, though it felt like the question didn't belong to me. It was a mechanical response, almost automatic. Ethan's handshake was firm, too firm. His eyes lingered just a second too long on me before he pulled away. He was tall, dressed in a dark shirt and jeans, with a watch that gleamed too brightly for my taste. Everything about him screamed confidence, an unearned kind of confidence that made my skin crawl. He was too comfortable with her, with my wife. I didn't realize you two were. I started, but I didn't know how to finish the sentence. My words felt clumsy, unworthy. Oh, it's nothing, Haley quickly interrupted, cutting me off. I told you, it's just an old friend, nothing more. Her smile was too wide, the same one she had given me moments ago. The one that didn't reach her eyes. The one that made my stomach turn. I wanted to argue. I wanted to demand more from her, to say that something was wrong. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I swallowed my questions, my doubts, and nodded like an idiot. Right? I muttered. I'm sorry. I just didn't realize. She waved it off as though it were nothing. It's fine, she said, looking back at Ethan and then at me, her eyes flickering briefly before she turned back to him, as if she was trying to dismiss me in that moment, as if I were the one causing the disturbance. You're just being paranoid, Mark. It's nothing. Really. The word stung. Paranoid. She said it like it was nothing, like I didn't matter in that moment. It felt like she was putting the blame on me. Suddenly, I wasn't just intruding on a conversation. I was intruding on her space, her personal time, as though I had no right to question what was happening. I'm not trying to make a scene, I said, suddenly feeling like the floor beneath me was unstable, like everything around me was starting to collapse in slow motion. I just don't understand why you're sitting so close to him. Why are you laughing like that? Her eyes softened just a fraction, but it didn't feel genuine. It's just a friendly conversation, Mark. You're overreacting. You've always been like this. You just can't let me have my space. Can you? She turned back to Ethan, and I was left standing there, feeling more like an outsider than ever before, as if the entire moment had already been forgotten. I wasn't sure what was more painful, the fact that I was watching this happen, or the fact that she was so quick to dismiss it. To dismiss me. She laughed again. It was that laugh that hadn't been directed at me in so long. It was too much. Without saying another word, I turned and left the table. I didn't know what else to do. All I wanted was to get out of there. I couldn't stand to watch anymore. Later, Haley would accuse me of being paranoid when I tried to talk about what had happened. She'd explain it away as a chance encounter, as though the whole thing could be brushed under the rug. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt, and I couldn't unsee it. She said it was nothing. She said I was paranoid. But it was clear to me that something was very, very wrong. The following days were suffocating. My mind couldn't settle, couldn't quiet the thoughts that buzzed in my head. Every glance, every small gesture from Haley seemed to carry a weight I hadn't noticed before. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial, something that I had ignored for far too long. The night at the club had stirred up a quiet storm, but it wasn't until the days that followed that the storm began to feel like a full-blown hurricane. It started with small things I had dismissed for months as minor quirks or misunderstandings. But now, with the image of Haley laughing with Ethan burned into my mind, everything felt different. I began to notice the way she acted when she thought I wasn't paying attention. The little things that used to be so ordinary, so routine, now seemed like clues to a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was trying to solve. Her sudden late-night meetings became more frequent, her business trips that always seemed to fall on weekends, and the way she began locking her phone whenever I came near. Her phone was now a fortress. I never used to think twice about it. But now, every time she flipped it over on the counter or pushed it out of my reach, my mind spiraled. She had never done that before. I tried not to dwell on it. I really did. I told myself I was being irrational, that I was overthinking things. But the little signs were undeniable. Her excuses had become more elaborate, and whenever I asked about her plans, she seemed irritated, defensive, like she was annoyed that I was even asking. I remembered the way she had snapped at me the last time I'd asked where she was going. Just to the gym, she'd said, her tone sharp. But when I asked if I could come with her, she had quickly dismissed the idea with an eye roll. It's just my workout time. You wouldn't enjoy it. And yet, when I checked the schedule on the fridge later, I saw that the gym had closed an hour before she said she'd been there. The nagging suspicion gnawed at me, but I pushed it down, trying to convince myself that it was nothing. Just a simple misunderstanding. Maybe she had gone to a different gym. Or maybe she'd just lost track of time. I told myself that I was being paranoid, that I was seeing shadows where there were none. But then there was the scent. One night, as Haley returned home from what she had told me was a meeting, I caught the familiar, unfamiliar scent. A faint trace of cologne. It wasn't mine and it wasn't hers. I didn't mention it at first. But the more I thought about it, the more I remembered how she had arrived home late that night, hurriedly rushing to the bathroom to freshen up. It wasn't just the smell. It was the way she had rushed inside, the way she avoided looking me in the eye as she walked past me. There was something off, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I wanted to confront her then. I wanted to ask her point-blank who she had been with, what she had been doing. But the words never came. Instead, I stood there, feeling like an intruder in my own life, watching her walk by me with a tight smile. The same smile she had given me the night at the club, when she waved me off and tried to convince me that everything was fine. Everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. I couldn't help myself. The more I thought about it, the more these small details collided in my mind, forming a picture I wasn't ready to accept. I realized then that there was so much I had been ignoring. So many small things that didn't add up, things I had convinced myself were just part of the ebb and flow of life. Work was stressful, I thought. She's just tired. She's just distracted. There were always excuses. But now it felt like the small cracks in the facade were starting to widen. Haley's moods had changed too. There was an edge to her that hadn't been there before, a sharpness that seemed to come out of nowhere. I could no longer ask her about her day without getting a short, irritated response. If I tried to talk about anything that wasn't work or routine, she'd grow defensive, as if I was prying into something I wasn't supposed to know. I had never seen her like this. Then came the new passwords. I remembered the night I noticed it for the first time. She was sitting at the kitchen table, tapping away on her phone, scrolling through something with a quick swipe. I walked by, casually glancing at the screen, but she snapped her phone shut before I could see anything. It wasn't the first time she'd done that, but it was the first time I felt a sting of recognition. Something wasn't right. Later that night, she left her phone on the coffee table while she went into the kitchen. Without thinking, I picked it up, my fingers hovering over the screen. I had always known her password. She'd never hidden it from me. But when I tried to unlock the phone, I was met with a lock screen I didn't recognize. Her thumbprint no longer worked. She had changed the password. I felt a strange jolt of panic in my chest. Why would she do that? I hadn't been snooping. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. But now it felt like the line had been crossed, like she was building a wall between us that I couldn't tear down. And the more I thought about it, the more my mind twisted the simple action into something sinister. Was she hiding something from me? Who was she hiding it from? I knew it was irrational to feel the way I did, but I couldn't help myself. Every detail seemed to link together into something I couldn't ignore. The new passwords, the strange behaviors, the late meetings, the phone always face down. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. It was a pattern that pointed to something I didn't want to see. But there was something else too. Something I hadn't noticed before but was now impossible to ignore. The cologne, the other man, and the nights she came home late, her clothes disheveled, her makeup smudged. The times I tried to ask her where she'd been, and she avoided the question, deflected with a sharp retort. I tried to tell myself that I was being paranoid, that I was seeing things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew that something was wrong. And no amount of reassurance from Haley, no amount of pretending everything was fine, was going to make that feeling go away. I was starting to see the cracks in our relationship, the ones that had been there for a long time but had been hidden beneath the surface. They had been there all along and I had ignored them. I had chosen to ignore them, but now I couldn't. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I opened the email. At first, I thought I might be overreacting, that I was jumping to conclusions. But when the words appeared on the screen in front of me, I felt the weight of reality sink deep into my chest. There it was, undeniable. An email, a booking confirmation for a small country house, registered under Haley's name and the name of a man I didn't recognize, Ethan Brooks. The date of the booking coincided perfectly with one of her supposed business trips that she'd told me about weeks ago. The same trip she'd claimed was just a regular meeting, nothing special. She'd told me she'd be gone for 2 days, attending a conference, working late and catching up with colleagues. The usual routine. But now, as I stared at the email, that routine felt like a lie. A well-crafted lie. My heart began to race. I could feel my pulse thumping in my ears, my hands starting to shake as I read over the details again. The booking was for a weekend at a secluded country house. The confirmation email listed the names of both Haley and Ethan as guests. It was a reservation made months ago. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was planned. I clicked the link for the booking address, then pulled up maps to double-check. The house was a 2-hour drive from the city, nestled in a quiet, secluded area. A place where no one would easily stumble upon them. A place where they could be alone, away from the prying eyes of the world. Couldn't breathe. I had to leave the house. I had to go there right now to see with my own eyes. There was no other choice. I couldn't just sit here and stew in the uncertainty. I needed proof. No more speculation, no more doubts. I grabbed my jacket, grabbed my keys, and left without a word. It didn't matter that it was late or that I was exhausted. I couldn't wait anymore. Not when I had the evidence sitting in front of me. I needed to confront this, to see it for myself, to know that I wasn't crazy. The drive was long, and the road felt endless. The darkness outside seemed to stretch on forever, and the closer I got to the country house, the more anxious I became. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, most of them dark. What had they been doing? What had she been telling me all this time? How had I been so blind to everything that had been happening right in front of me? I turned off the main road, onto a smaller, narrow path that led into the woods. The house was tucked away at the end of this road, hidden by the thick trees and the deep darkness of the night. As I pulled up to the driveway, I felt a lump form in my throat. There, in front of me, was Haley's car. The same car she'd been driving to work. The one I thought had been parked at the office when she'd claimed she was working late. The same car that now sat, parked at the entrance to this isolated house. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. I just sat there in my car for a moment, staring at the house, my mind struggling to process what was happening. I had to go inside. I had to see. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward the front door, my steps heavy and unsure. As I reached for the handle, I could hear the sounds of laughter coming from inside. Haley's laugh. It sent a sharp pain through my chest, but I kept moving forward, step by step, until I reached the door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open, slowly, silently, the door creaking as I stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by soft lights, and I could hear the sound of clinking glasses and voices. The laughter I had heard before was now joined by another man's voice, a voice I recognized. Ethan's voice. "Haley," he said, and I heard the playful tone in his voice. "You should see the view from this window. It's incredible. I know you'll love it. Maybe we should go check it out," Haley responded, her voice light and carefree. There was a warmth to it, a familiarity that made my stomach churn. She hadn't laughed like that with me in ages. She hadn't spoken to me like that in months. And here she was, speaking to him like they shared a history, like they had an int asterisk Macy I didn't know about. I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time for that. This wasn't about anger. It was about truth. It was about seeing things for what they really were. I stayed hidden in the shadows, watching them without saying a word. The house was cozy, comfortable, and eerily familiar. It looked like home with personal touches, photos of Haley, framed art, and items that clearly belonged to her. It wasn't just a rented getaway. It was a second home, a place that she had set up for a life she hadn't shared with me. They were getting closer now. I could see them standing together by the window, their bodies almost touching, the way they exchanged glances that seemed to say more than words ever could. Ethan reached out, lightly brushing her hair back from her face. It was a simple int asterisk mate gesture, a gesture that made my skin crawl. I had been right. This wasn't a fleeting moment. It wasn't an accident. This wasn't just some mistake. This was planned, carefully thought out, an ongoing affair. The house, the planning, the stolen moments, everything clicked into place. My heart was breaking. It was more than betrayal. It was the realization that she had been living a separate life. A life she had kept hidden from me. One that had grown and evolved in the spaces where I couldn't see. A life where I didn't belong. I wanted to confront them. I wanted to storm in there, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I turned and walked back toward the door. I knew there was no going back. The truth was in front of me now. It was clear. It wasn't just a mistake, a slip-up, or a miscommunication. It was a choice. It had been a choice all along. I stepped outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. The silence around me felt deafening, like the world had gone still. My mind raced, but my body felt numb. Haley had chosen. She had chosen Ethan. She had built a life for herself outside of our marriage, outside of everything we had shared. And I was no longer a part of it. The drive back from the country house felt like I was moving through thick fog. Everything was blurry. The world around me seemed distant, as though I were disconnected from it. The only thing clear in my mind was the image of Haley, standing in that house, sharing a life with another man. A life that wasn't mine. A life she hadn't even bothered to share with me. I couldn't understand it. I thought we were happy. I thought we were solid. Yet here I was, driving home in the dark, trying to piece together the fragments of a marriage that had suddenly, inexplicably, fallen apart. My chest felt tight with the weight of the truth. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't a temporary mistake or an impulse. No, it was a parallel life. A life that Haley had carefully constructed, step by step, and I had never once suspected it. It wasn't just the house. It was the details, the moments that added up, that now stood like undeniable proof in my mind. The emails, the late meetings, the strange excuses, the way she had changed over time, pulling away from me in subtle ways I had ignored. The truth had been there under the surface, but I had refused to see it. Now, it was impossible to deny. She had created a second life, a different version of herself, one that didn't include me. The realization hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung. It was the knowledge that Haley had been living this double existence, lying to me for months, maybe even years. She had been going to this house, living a life with Ethan, while I had been left to hold together the facade of a marriage that no longer existed. She had been building something without me, a world I wasn't a part of. As I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling of being lost. The house, which had once felt like home, now felt alien. I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to face the person I had once loved, the person who had so easily turned her back on me. I sat in the car for a few moments, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The weight of it all was crushing. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. Haley had made her choice, and it was time for me to make mine. I finally got out of the car and walked into the house. It was quiet, too quiet. Haley wasn't home yet, and the silence only made everything feel more real. I stood in the entryway for a moment, staring at the space that had once felt so full of life, so full of promise. Now it felt hollow, empty. The pictures on the walls, the trinkets we had collected together, the small moments that once seemed so important, they all felt like remnants of a past life, a life that was no longer mine. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a drink, my hands shaking as I held the glass. I needed something to numb the ache in my chest, to silence the thoughts that were spiraling out of control. But even the alcohol couldn't dull the reality of what had happened. When Haley finally came home, it was late. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately locking onto me. She paused, just for a second, her gaze flickering with uncertainty, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, almost too soft. "What are you doing up so late?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Instead, I just looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time in a long time, she was different now. She wasn't the woman I had married. The woman in front of me was a stranger, someone who had carefully hidden pieces of herself from me, someone who had built a life behind my back. "I was waiting for you," I finally said, my voice flat. "I need to talk to you." Her smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Sure, what's going on?" I couldn't hold it in anymore. I didn't want to keep pretending. I didn't want to let her spin some story, some excuse that would make everything okay again. It wasn't okay. None of this was okay. "I went to the house," I said, my voice steady but cold. "The country house. The one you've been going to." She froze. Her eyes widened for just a moment before she quickly looked away. "What do you mean? Why would you?" "I found the booking," I interrupted, not giving her a chance to deflect. "I saw the emails. I saw the dates. I saw everything, Haley. It's not a mistake. It's not just a chance encounter. You've been planning this. You've been living a life with him." The words hung in the air between us, thick and heavy, like a weight I couldn't escape. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. I could see her trying to piece together some kind of defense, some lie to cover up the truth. But the truth was right there in front of her, undeniable. "I never meant for this to happen," she finally said, her voice trembling. It just happened. I didn't know how to tell you." "Tell me," I repeated, my anger rising despite myself. "You didn't need to tell me, Haley. You didn't need to lie to me for months. You didn't need to pretend everything was fine while you were building another life behind my back." She took a step toward me, reaching out as though she was trying to calm me. But I pulled away, not wanting to feel her touch. "Not anymore. I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. I just needed something. I didn't know what to do. Ethan made me feel alive again. I didn't know how to fix it." My chest tightened as I listened to her words. "Alive again?" I scoffed. "Is that what this is? You needed him to make you feel alive? You couldn't come to me, couldn't talk to me?" Haley's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. I had cried enough for the both of us. "I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could have both. I thought I could keep you and have him too." It wasn't a confession. It was an excuse. A weak, pathetic excuse for the choices she had made. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence settle between us. I realized then that this wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just about Ethan. It was about everything we had lost, everything she had destroyed. I had given her my trust, my love, my heart, and she had taken it all and shattered it. "You've been living a separate life," I said, my voice cold. "You've been living in two worlds, and I was too blind to see it." Haley didn't say anything. She just stood there, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. But I couldn't feel sorry for her anymore. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. "I'm done, Haley," I said, my voice final, unyielding. "I'm done pretending. I'm done with you." In the days that followed, I felt like I was watching my life from a distance, like I had stepped outside of myself and was now observing the wreckage of everything I had known. It felt unreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The house, once a sanctuary of shared memories, now felt like a cage, a place I couldn't bear to be. The weight of Haley's betrayal was suffocating, and I couldn't escape it. I thought I had known her. I thought I had understood who she was, what she wanted, what we meant to each other. But everything had been a lie. After the confrontation, Haley tried to talk to me, tried to explain, to convince me that she hadn't meant for any of it to happen. But every time she opened her mouth, I heard nothing but excuses, nothing but self-justifications. She would sit there, eyes brimming with tears, trying to paint herself as the victim, as though I was the one who had pushed her into this. She told me how I had changed, how things had grown stale between us. She spoke of loneliness, of how she had felt neglected, of how she needed something more. It was as though she was rewriting our history, substituting the truth with a narrative that served her own needs. I heard her out, half listened, really, but it was clear she wasn't truly sorry. She was sorry she'd been caught. She was sorry that everything had unraveled, but not for what she had done. She was sorry that I had discovered the truth, but not for the lies she had told to create her second life. Every word that came out of her mouth was an attempt to rewrite her own image, to substitute guilt with innocence, and to paint herself as someone trapped, someone who had no other choice but to find solace in another man's arms. She told me that Ethan made her feel seen, that he gave her attention she hadn't felt in years. And there it was, the core of it all. She hadn't been looking for someone to love. She hadn't been looking for someone to build a future with. No, she had been looking for validation, for the kind of attention that could fill the empty spaces in her life that she had somehow convinced herself I wasn't filling. Her words twisted in my mind. She had turned me into the villain of our story, the one who had failed her, the one who had made her feel invisible. And in doing so, she had rewritten the past. She wanted me to believe that her actions were justified, that the affair wasn't about betrayal but about survival. She wanted me to buy into the lie that this wasn't her fault, that she was the victim in a marriage that had somehow broken down beyond repair. But the more she spoke, the more I realized that this wasn't just about her affair. This was about her complete redefinition of who I was in her life. I wasn't just a husband she had betrayed. I had become a character in her narrative, a plot device she had used to justify her actions. In her story, I was no longer Mark, her partner, the man she had once loved. I had become a tragic figure, a placeholder for the husband who didn't meet her needs, who couldn't give her the life she wanted. And with that realization came a sharp, bitter truth. She hadn't just betrayed me with Ethan. She had betrayed the very person I thought I was in her life. The man who had stood by her, the man who had loved her unconditionally, had been replaced with someone else in her eyes. A man who was inadequate, who was no longer worthy of her affection. I wasn't just the victim of an affair. I was the victim of an identity theft. She had stolen my place in her world and substituted me with an image of the man she wished I had been, the man she needed me to be. I had been cast aside, erased from the narrative, so she could build a new version of herself, one where she wasn't accountable for her actions. And in doing so, she had rewritten the rules of our marriage, erasing the boundaries, the trust, and the shared history we had once built together. But I was done with her story. I was done being her tragic figure. I wasn't going to play the role she had written for me. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the narrative any longer. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about control. Haley had been manipulating the truth for months, if not years, crafting a narrative where she was always justified, where her actions were always explained away, where the blame never rested on her. And I had let her. I had allowed myself to be gaslight, to be made to feel like I was the one at fault for everything that went wrong in our marriage. I had always believed that I was strong, that I was capable of holding our relationship together, that I could weather any storm. But I had been blind to the fact that Haley had been building a secret world around me, a world where I had no place. I had been content to play the role she had cast me in, the dutiful husband who supported her, who listened to her, who gave her everything she wanted. But in return, I had received nothing. Nothing real. Nothing genuine. And now, as I sat in the empty house, the weight of that realization crushed me. This wasn't just about the affair. This was about Haley's need to control everything, to create a life that revolved around her. A life where she was always the center of attention, where she could rewrite the rules of her own happiness and ignore the consequences of her actions. As I sat there, the anger began to fade, replaced by a cold, bitter clarity. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I wasn't going to let her rewrite my story. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. I had to walk away. I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was just a supporting character, a man who existed only to serve her needs. I couldn't continue to play the role of the betrayed husband, the one who would sit quietly and accept her excuses, her lies, her manipulation. No, I had to find my own story, my own voice. I had to reclaim myself. But first, I had to leave. The moment I realized everything, I didn't scream or argue. I simply walked away. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me any longer, or be part of her twisted game. The finality of it hit me hard, but I knew it was the right choice. Haley had made her life without me, and I couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted. I didn't need to prove anything to her or myself. I packed my things quietly, refusing to engage in any more of her explanations or justifications. The silence was the end of our story, and I realized that freedom doesn't begin with revenge. It begins with walking away from what no longer belongs to you. Months passed, and I began to rebuild my life, not in response to Haley, but for myself. I started writing, capturing reality without filters. The pain was still there, but so was clarity. I realized that moment in the club when Haley laughed with Ethan wasn't the end, it was the exit. It was the moment I took back my life, stopped editing my story to fit someone else's, and began writing my own future again. I wasn't defined by her betrayal anymore. I was free.